So, another week has gone by and another episode has been released, and I'm here to break it down for you all because, hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my breakdown and review for My Hero Academia Vigilantes Season 2, Episode 6. And while there isn't as much to break down in this episode, there's still a lot that we really need to go over due to the fact that this is a start of a brand new arc in the season revolving around Aizawa as well as his past. And we're going to be getting into that very soon. But before we do that, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more breakdowns and reviews involving My Hero Academia as well as Vigilantes. Without the way, let's dive right into the breakdown. And to start off, the title of this episode is Rain and Cloud, which actually takes its name from Manga Chapter 59, as well as this episode covers new material from chapters 59 and 60. Hey, so there is some stuff that I actually missed in this episode that I'm going to either bring up within the sections that are the most appropriate, or I may put it at the end of the entire breakdown segment. So depending on how I edit it, you're going to either see this at the end or interspliced in between. So let's begin. And something interesting about this episode, as well as this arc, is that starting with this episode, the anime adapts the School Days arc prior to the Sky Egg arc, unlike in the manga where it's reversed. To start off, as a result of the anime adapting the School Days arc prior to the Sky Egg arc, the present day events actually occur in late fall, opposed to early spring the following year of the manga. This is important because it means that at this moment in the story, Koichi has yet to finish his first year of college. It is not necessarily a big deal unless they decide to not move the Sky Egg arc to actually occur during the springtime. But this is what happens when you kind of change the timeline of things because it makes everything a little bit wonky. And how this is actually the second instance of an anime in this franchise of My Hero Academia producing a story arc out of order. With the first being in the 5th season of the main series My Hero Academia, with the Endeavor Agency arc and the Meta Liberation Army arc being reversed and flipped. And how I think that with My Hero Academia Vigilantes, this flip works a lot better in this anime, in this section of the anime, in comparison to what we got in the 5th season of My Hero Academia, which was done not so great, if not poorly. But diving into the episode itself, the episode begins very much like in chapter 59, with a phone call from Midnight urging Aizawa to join both her and Present Mike as teachers at UA while grooming her little cat. And how Midnight, during this conversation, brings up the recent acquirement of Present Mike to UA, as well as she brings up a very touchy subject that sets off and eventually shuts down the conversation between her and Aizawa, which most likely, in a way, we're going to be learning over the next few episodes why this is the case. Also, when it comes to when Midnight and Aizawa are having their conversation, the anime actually adds more shots of Midnight during her phone call when she's actually calling Aizawa. And I won't go into full spoilers for it right now, but if you've read the actual series of My Hero Academia proper, as well as seen the anime which has concluded by this time, you can understand the trials and tribulations that Aizawa will most likely be going through in this flashback, as well as the conclusion that's going to come from it, which has grave ramifications on the main series as we know it. Also, with the introduction of a brand new title page for the actual title of the episode, which is titled Flashback, we're most likely going to be consisting of this entire flashback taking place over the next 2 to 3 episodes at most, which means that you need to buckle up, for this is going to be a wild ride as we dive into the flashback of Aizawa. as after the OP, we get the title screen, as I mentioned, being flashback, hinting that this arc will primarily be in a flashback. And how after that, the scene starts from a new perspective unique to the anime of Koichi, a little girl, and a kitten running away from a wolf man from the perspective of an alleyway, most likely alluding to the alleyway that Aizawa was in, and how this was completely absent from the manga. But what is present in the manga is how Koichi tells the little girl to run with the kitten as he acts as a distraction, and how the little girl slips and nearly drops the cat. Aizawa finally comes in, rescues the girl, the kitten, and subdues the wolf villain. Also, when it comes to when Aizawa saves the girl and the kitten, the anime actually slightly extends the scene of this girl falling as well as the kitten falling as well as we get to see Aizawa rescuing them and stopping the villain. And how Koichi is glad to see Aizawa in this moment, as Aizawa asks why the situation occurs, as Koichi explains how he was looking after this little kitten and trying to help this girl figure out what they're going to do with the kitten, as this villain, who's actually on trigger as seen from his darkened tongue, decided to attack them for no apparent reason other than him wanting to go after weak people. But it's from here where we do get a small change between the anime and the manga, because as Aizawa is reporting on his capture of this villain, it begins to rain very much like in the manga. However, in the anime, the Wolfman who was tied up is in front of a store instead of being on the side of the building as it was in the manga. Now, when it comes to when it begins to rain, we actually do get pretty much a point-for-point reenactment of the conversation that Koichi has with Aizawa, talking about Koichi potentially taking care of the kitten, how he may not be able to take care of it, and how he needs to find another person to take care of it. Now, this entire conversation is a precursor for Aizawa going into his flashback, which begins very similarly to what happened with Koichi, as Aizawa finds a kitten in a box, similar to how Koichi saw the girl find that kitten in a box. Which is very depressing to think about how many times in Japan media, kittens are depicted in cardboard boxes. And when it comes to this scene, there's something that I really want to bring up, which is how the color scheme for both this moment in the present as well as the color scheme in the flashback is done in a way that is unique to anime and animation. Because what the anime is able to do with this color scheme that the manga could not is actually set up a more gloomy atmosphere by having the colors be more muted in the anime due to the incoming rain, as well as having a feeling of melancholy being conveyed in the anime, as rain is associated with sadness, melancholy, as well as in Japanese media is very much a reoccurring theme when it comes to flashbacks as well. And how many flashbacks tend to be sad, as rain can be a way of causing depressive and saddening moments. What's also very interesting is how they do not use the same color scheme for the flashback, because from what we've seen with the flashback throughout this entire episode, the color scheme is very much giving off a similar tone. However, you can tell that the coloring and shading is slightly different, as it seems to have a more sepia tone visual to it. And how this sepia tone aesthetic is very much prominent throughout the entire episode, even in moments where it's a lot brighter in the flashback. And what's interesting about the sepia tone visual aesthetic is that it's usually used to depict a sense of warmth and nostalgia. However, within the context of the story of My Hero Academia and the character of Aizawa, it actually makes for a very great dynamic contrast when it comes to the tone that is being presented, with both the tone of the flashback as well as the personality of Aizawa. Because instead of making this entire flashback feel more warm and nostalgic with this color, it actually is more somber, emotional, and melancholic, which fits with what happens towards the end of the flashback that Aizawa has, but how this color scheme is going to be an even greater contrast for what is to conclude this arc. And all in all, the fact that the anime in Vigilantes is willing to have these differences in shading and having this difference of color scheme in flashbacks, which is not really seen in My Hero Academia proper, really just sets this anime apart from its contemporary of the main franchise. But since we're talking about the flashback, this is the moment where we actually begin to go into the flashback, where we actually start off with the anime extending the scene from the manga of Aizawa's first encounter with the orange kitten, which later on we're going to learn is named Sushi, and how this expansion in the anime really adds to the dialogue being said by Aizawa, which within the context of this flashback is being told to Koichi. Now the dialogue of Aizawa telling Koichi his story is about how he doesn't really believe in himself and his ability to help others, which is very much emphasized in the extension of this flashback when he's seeing the kitten, and later on shown in the episode where we learn that Oboro was the one that actually saved the kitten, which puts a sort of downtrodden feeling on Aizawa, which will be following him throughout the flashback. But now that we've brought up Oboro, we also get very much a point-for-point reenactment between the anime and the manga of Aizawa, as well as the reintroduction of Yamada, aka Present Mike, and Oboro. But now that we've actually brought up Oboro, this is going to be something that I'm going to most likely save for the next episode or the episode after that, because it is a big spoiler for who this character is in the main series, and what influence it has on Aizawa, which we're going to learn later on in this season. But I will say that this character is going to be very important, and the fact that we're getting this flashback in a side story is both a good and a bad thing, especially with the context of how this chapter was released, which I will be getting into towards the end of this arc in an episode or two. But overall, we get the reintroduction of Yamada as well as the introduction of Oboro, as we see that they are very much the class clowns of his class A relative to his years at UA. And how Oboro is able to arrive to school soaking wet, as it's revealed that he was the individual that actually saved the kitten, and how we get a good understanding of what his personality is, very much like in the manga, of being a little bit stupid yet lovable and very much outgoingly goofy. And how we get to see more of this goofiness very much in the anime like in the manga, as this section of the anime plays out like in the manga chapter it's based on, with us seeing Oboro and Yamada interacting with their classmates in a very funny and comedic way, as they even keep the scene where Oboro strips naked out of his wet clothes in front of his classmates to their annoyance, but also is able to reel them back in by pulling out a little kitten. You know, the kitten that he saved. There are some small changes made to this section of the anime, and how some of these changes include how all of the students are now wearing their summer UA uniforms instead of their regular ones, which makes sense within the time frame of when this story is taking place, which is during the summertime. However, it does not clearly state at what point in the summertime this story or flashback is taking place, so they probably should be in their regular uniform. However, because it states that it is summertime, it makes sense that they will be in summer uniform. As well as with that small change, there is another small change in the anime, which is how when it comes to Sushi being on Oboro's cloud, we see that Sushi is sleeping on the hovering cloud in front of Oboro's desk in the anime. However, in the manga, he is actually sleeping and the cloud is directly on Oboro's desk in the manga. Also, when Oboro yells out for a towel, the anime shows Hisashi Yamada loudly offering him one before the teacher yells at the both of them. In the manga, however, it's only followed by the teacher telling Oboro to quickly dry off. So, very small changes, but still interesting changes nevertheless, that really just shows that the anime is a different medium and is a different experience from the manga, and that's something that is great about both, and that one shouldn't be a direct adaptation of the other because it could invalidate one medium instead of lifting both of them up. And how we get a very adorable moment of Aizawa looking at Oboro which in both the anime and the manga can be a very telltale sign for what is going to be happening to him. But it's from here where we get more into material from chapter 60, where the anime shows Yamada, Aizawa, and Oboro have yet to get work studies for their summer vacation, as we cut to the class beginning to suit up for their training exercises with Class B. And it's here where we get a little bit more changes between the anime and the manga, as it's here where the anime extends the training montage for more or less all 3 segments of the training exercises, but does so in slightly different ways for each. And the one that gets the most change and additions are the one-on-one battles, where we actually see in more detail in the anime the other members of both Class A and Class B, as well as we get to see them fight happening in a more sequential way instead of a more all-out brawl as it was in the manga. As well as we get to see a little bit more of Oboro, Yamada, and Aizawa's fights, as well as we get to see the anime show off a little bit more of their unique fighting styles that would eventually carry on into their adult hero work. And how each animation sequence is animated extremely well, especially Oboro and Aizawa's, which are more physical and hand-to-hand combat focused. But then we also get a slight extension on the rescue training, where not much is actually added outside of seeing everything a little bit more clearly and in more detail in the anime versus the manga. But a small change is where we see them learning how to dance, which is to help inform their popularity as heroes, where we see the students dancing inside of the gym in their school gym clothing in the anime, while in the manga they are dancing in an unknown area wearing their hero costumes. And this isn't really a prominent change, and another interesting one, which shows more of the academic part and showing that they're more willing to change these smaller details to fit more within the school setting than to just have them be out there without any type of coherent measure to it. But after the training, we do get the scene very much like in the manga of Oboro and Yamada being praised for most likely going to have a bright future in heroics from their teachers. However, Aizawa does not get that same praise, as we do get the scene from the manga in the anime that shows Aizawa struggling against and losing his fight with the Class B member Sen Soji, who chastises Aizawa over his quirk as well as how he uses his quirk, and how the teacher believes that Aizawa will struggle to be a hero because of his quirk. Which we also see Aizawa feels the same way about it. However, he does have his friends Yamada as well as Oboro trying to cheer him up and tell him that his quirk and his unique aspects and fighting style is what will potentially make him to be a good hero. As well as we get a funny moment of Aizawa chastising Oboro for trying to feed Sushi human food as he pulls out a random bottle of cat formula. As this is where we get probably the best and funniest part of the episode, in my opinion, which is the reintroduction of Midnight, aka Kayama, where we get the anime extending her introduction. It's from here where we also probably get the best scene of Kayama declaring why her costume is so bold and revolutionary, even though she's basically naked, as it's revealed in this moment, for why characters like Kirishima and Momo have a lot less skin showing, because her new costume is the reasoning why a law was created that restricts how much skin heroes can show, which makes sense and is very hilarious to me. As well as with the anime, it actually does not specify the specific law that was passed after the legal discussion around hero costume exposure, but it still keeps the conversation about it. And something else is that after Shota comments on Nomura's costume, in the anime, Yamada compliments his snark. In the manga, he points out the comment as a self-burn. Most likely because he does not have the same fascination and alluring gaze of Midnight in this moment as Oboro as well as Yamada as well in this moment. But it's from here where we still get very much like in the manga an understanding of Kayama's relationship with the 3 boys that we have here. And it's from this moment where we see when she falls in love with the kitten. We have the name Sushi coming from, and how it's very obvious that the cat that we saw towards the beginning of the episode is an older version of the kitten that we see here, aka Sushi. And how we begin to wrap up this episode with the reveal of Sushi having been potty trained and no longer having to pee on Oboro, as Kayama eventually makes a declaration to Oboro and Aizawa to join her under her hero mentor agency for their work study. As Yamada has already joined a work study, the entire episode wraps up with an anime edition that happens after Nimura offers Aizawa and Oboro to join her work study program. The anime adds an original scene of her showing them a video of His Purple Highness and telling them about his office, that this is the hero who will be taking them under his wing. And from appearance and name alone, you can obviously guess that this is a reference to Prince, or the man formerly known as Prince. That is where the episode ends. So yeah, overall, this was a really solid episode. Not a lot of changes were actually made between the anime as well as the manga, but the small changes that we had were very great, especially when it comes to setting up the tone and the aesthetic of this flashback, which will most likely continue on into the next few episodes, which will probably have a lot more action and a lot more changes with them. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for right now. So let me ask you this. How did you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And are you enjoying the flashback of Aizawa so far? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!